Okay, so my presentation is going to be over spinal cord injuries. A spinal cord injury is damage to the spinal cord that can result in someone to lose the function in their mobility and or in their feeling. So I found three things that could cause spinal cord injuries. The first one is trauma, and this could be anything from a car accident to gunshots or to just falling. The second thing that I found is diseases could cause spinal cord injuries, meaning like polio, cancer, spinal tumors, anything like that. And then the third thing that I found is sports. So there's four different types of um, spinal cord injuries. The first one is called cervical spinal cord injuries, and this one is in your head and neck region above your shoulders. The second one is lumbar spinal cord injuries, and this one will affect your hips and your legs. The third one is thoracic spinal cord injuries, and this one will affect your upper chest, mid back, and abdominal muscles. The last one that I found is sacral spinal cord injuries, and this is in your hips, the back of your thighs, and your pelvic organs. So there's two different categories that spinal cord injuries could be divided into. The first type is a complete spinal cord injury. A complete injury means that there is no function below the level of the injury and there is no sensation or movement, and both sides of the body are going to be equally affected. And then the second type is an incomplete spinal cord injury, and an incomplete injury means that there is some function below the level of injury, and the person might be able to move one limb more than another, um, and they could be able to feel parts of their body that they physically can't move, or they might have more function on one side of their body than the other side of their body. But out of the two injuries or two categories, incomplete injuries are more common to see than complete injuries. So there are so many people in the world that are living with spinal cord injuries. The life expectancy of someone with a spinal cord injury really varies and depends on what level their injury is on. So what I found is that the main thing is 85% of people with spinal cord injuries that survive the injury within the first 24 hours of having it are alive still 10 years later. So how could spinal cord injuries affect students' learning? In school settings, students with spinal cord injuries may experience barriers to socialization and educational activities. Students with spinal cord injuries also struggle with self-care, meaning that some of them cannot go to the restroom by themselves. Something as simple as this can cause them to become embarrassed in front of their friends. And then some students with spinal cord injuries can't write, they can't speak, they can't feed themselves, just things like that. Stuff that we do on a day-to-day basis that we don't think about, they can't do. Students who also have spinal cord injuries also struggle with communication. Like I just said, that some of them can't really can't talk to other people. And students or people just in general that have spinal cord injuries really rely on other people to help them, and they really rely on assistive and medical technology. The technology in schools for students with spinal cord injuries is used to help their functional independence and participation. So students with spinal cord injuries are going to need a lot of accommodations and modifications to help them continue to be successful in their school career. Students are going to need physical accommodations and modifications like ramps put inside and outside of the school if there's not already some. Um, they may also need doorways to be widened if they're not already wide enough for wheelchairs to fit through, because most people who have spinal cord injuries are put in wheelchairs. Another thing is the desks or tables that the school might have may need to be fixed to be high enough to where students with wheelchairs can fit underneath them and sit at a desk like a regular kid. Students may also need scheduling accommodations. So what I found is that some teachers will consider a partial day schedule for students. And what that is they'll put all of the academic stuff that they need to know and need to learn in the morning, and then the afternoon the student will get to leave so that they can attend therapy if they need to go. Students with spinal cord injuries also, like I mentioned earlier, that some of them can't go to the bathroom by themselves. Some of them can't control when they need to go to the bathroom. So you need to allow rest breaks and restroom breaks within your schedule while they're there so that they can go to the bathroom and don't have an accident and embarrass themselves. And then this is this would be in a third, more fourth and fifth and on up for this last one. So I know we switched classes now a bunch, and so one thing that you could do is allow your student to leave class early so that they're not getting ran over in the hallway by other kids going to the next class. Students with spinal cord injuries, with testing, students may need extra time on assignments, or they may need multiple days to complete an assignment, or even multiple days to complete a test. Some teachers will allow their students to give an oral response instead of a written one, because this goes back to the not being able to go to the bathroom by themselves, and they have a hard time communicating. Some of them are going to have a hard time reading and writing, and they'll even have a hard time orally talking to you, but the way that they orally talk to you is going to be better than a written response. So the students are also going to need to they're also going to need accommodations and modifications in the classroom. So this goes back to maybe the desks being high enough, and just like tests, students are going to need extended time on written assignments. Students may also need a laptop because they are somewhat easier to use for these students, because all they need to do is just hit a button, and there's a lot of shortcuts that you can put on a laptop that you can't put in writing. They also, in the classroom, they also may prefer to sit near the door, so it's easier and quicker for the students to get in and out of the classroom. And then the last thing that students may need accommodations and modifications for are for programs. So teachers, this could be anything like what I have listed here for field trips, in the cafeteria, anything like that. Teachers need to be certain that if they go on a field trip, all of the necessary accommodations were considered so that these students can participate in the field trips. And then students may also need help setting up their meals or snacks, like in the cafeteria. And I know we don't really think of that as a program, but it's kind of like a program setting. Like when you go to the cafeteria, you know that you're going to eat. So then another thing is when teachers and staff are giving out instructions, they need to decrease the amount of written instructions that they give out. They need to verbally say what they want them to do. students need a modified workload too, and students will also need to help from their peers, whether that means help on taking notes or help reading or help in the cafeteria to help fix their meal or snacks if somebody's not there to help them already. So stuff like that. And then so students are going to need a lot of help when and if they come back to school after their injury. So they're going to need help from their friends and their teachers. They're going to need help from special education teachers, plus their own teacher, the principal, the students' parents, and someone from their medical team to create a plan that is going to work for that particular student. Students are more than likely going to need a teacher's aide with them at all times, just so they can help with their learning, they can help them go to the bathroom, they can help them do all those things that they can't do by themselves anymore. They're also going to need the nurse to know everything about them as far as medical needs goes, just in case an emergency happens. So outside of schools, students are more than likely going to have to attend many different therapy appointments and doctor visits. A student's medical team may include a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, a social worker, a dietitian. There was 2 more therapists that some went to, but not a lot. And then they're gonna have a doctor who specializes in spinal cord injuries, and then some of them will have I think this is for the cervical spinal cord injuries. Those medical teams will include a neurologist because the injury is so close to their head rather than down at their hips. But those are who help them on their medical side of it. And so here are some teacher tips. One teacher tip that I came across is we don't want to ask ourselves or our teacher team, can we do it? But we want to ask, how are we going to do it? Meaning, like, we don't want to ask ourselves, well, how are we going to teach them because they have a disability? We want to ask ourselves, how are we going to do it? Because we have to do it. Another thing is knowing what to expect. So if you know that you're going to have a student with a spinal cord injury, then you need to start doing your research about that student in particular, maybe what happened, why they have the spinal cord injury. You need to know what they can do, what they can't do, what's too much, what's not enough, things like that. Just like everything else in the world, each student with a spinal cord injury is unique and is going to have different and specific requirements and needs. And then we also need to learn, like I said earlier, we need to learn the medical needs of the child. So this is one thing that I think would be put off more on the nurse. But as a teacher, if that kid's in your class, then you need to know it too, because sometimes the nurse isn't going to be able to get there fast enough to do whatever needs to be done. And then my last tip would be to be patient and understanding towards these kids, just like you would any other kid. And then here are my resources.